Hey, Stephen.
Hello, hello. How are you
We
doing?
are finally, well, it was only, I had an eye infection last Friday, so we skipped that one. But so
Yeah.
streak broken, but we are definitely back. How are you doing, my friend?
Uh, I uh, I hurt myself.
Oh, what happened?
Like 5 minutes ago, maybe tried to set up the camera, and I was so stupid and I hit my elbow on the chair. But besides
Oh,
that, I feel good.
okay, good, good.
Um,
So nothing
it is
serious.
quite. It's getting autumny winter here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how's it at your place.
So, I've said that probably many times whenever people ask me if it's blue skies and sunny outside, temperature matters less here in Iceland. But it's right now we have 5, 6, 7 degrees, but it's getting to a point now when in the morning it's like minus, and there's a frost on the car windows.
Ooh.
But and then it can go up to 10, 11 degrees, so it varies quite a bit more right now. But it's sunny outside, good weather, so no complaints.
Nice. And you're up, healthy, and running. That's good.
Yeah, well, healthy, that's debatable, but something certainly is happening
Your
there.
your 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 voice and brain is there. That's
Yeah,
two good preconditions.
yeah. All right, let's get some background music going. And as always, folks, if you join us, let us know where you are watching from and say hi and ask your questions. We are here to help.
Yes.
Now, Stephen, we usually get started by you showing off if there's any community-related stuff or
Yes.
summary
Yes.
things that we should be aware of.
That's true.
Right, so,
That's
so you
true.
want to do
And
the usual?
do the usual, huh? We do the
Yeah.
usual. Let me find. I'm already sharing my screen, huh? So I would assume let's try the new layouts we prepared. That's why we were offline last week. We just prepared layouts. No, I'm just kidding. So I will put us here. We will start with Can It Run Do. No, that was just the last tab I had opened, which I found very amusing. But anyway, back to the unit. Oh, let me make this a bit bigger, I guess. I hope this is fine that we put us here. And I don't think there was any movement, to be honest. We had one ticket. And I closed that. That was 2 weeks ago, and I'm not sure if we discussed this 2 weeks ago. I think we discussed this 2 weeks ago. If I just look at the date.
Oh yeah. You redirected over
September?
to
Yeah, exactly.
to our friend Simon Krupp's.
Yeah, exactly. Who has this very nice Verify bUnit or Verify Blazor package. And to be honest, I never ever followed up. I'm just out of curiosity. Oh, it's still open. Okay. But besides that, yes, we have one pull request from you. Basically, two pull requests, to be honest, from you.
Yeah.
And a lot of bump of packages. We could update those packages, but I don't think that's very
No,
interesting.
so that's two things I think. So most of them have that red X next to them because the build is failing, and I believe the build is failing because of the thing I want to try with my pull requests, which is the allow await for render. Now, I did write to you before last week's stream, that never happened, that I wanted to go over that pull request with you. That's so because it was sort of, I got an idea, I threw together a solution, and I didn't feel like I had thought it all the way, like thought about it deeply and understood, make sure I there was no mistakes, no. I actually haven't added any tests, so I think it would be nice if we can work on that, but also discuss the sort of if the realization I had is actually correct, it's a good realization or not, and just basically make sure that this is how it's supposed to be. Now I'm trying to see.
Okay.
So let me just get
Take over the screen.
So no, but one thing I want to do first though is too many windows open. There we go. I do want to make sure I have it cloned locally first, because I think I actually did this change on my laptop.
Yeah.
1 second.
I guess I still. If not, I have your feature branch open on a code space, dev space, dev container, but that's my dev container.
I think it should be. That is, here we go, and we can open that up in Visual Studio. All right.
Awesome.
Now, yeah. So, and I am.
Okay,
I need to move you over to the side so I can see
Bye.
what's going on the. Yeah. All right. So if we jump over here to my screen, so the unit tests that we see that we have in our test suite that keep failing, and there are sometimes related tests that keep failing, and we can actually maybe go in and have a look at one of the actions here for. Well, why not have this one?
They are all failing, but I guess they are failing now for different reasons.
Oh yeah, this is test report. That's again maybe because it's coming from. Yeah, okay, so that was a bit rushed. I merged that in, but this is basically because to be able to create a test report, you have to have certain permissions. So that is not allowed when it's coming from a user that's not part of. It's not you and I, right? It's not somebody who's in here. But if we go and scroll down and let's see if we can find the test that it thinks failed. Okay.
Missing method exception, but that sounds like.
Oh, it's because it's an update.
RC1?
Yeah, this is specific to. I think it's specific to an update. This is an update to AngleSharp, so this might actually be a valid point that it's failing because it's. So let's have a look at one of the other ones instead. So
you had 6 or 7 to select, and you found the one which is actually
I took the
broken.
one where our test suite actually caught stuff that was wrong. All right, let's have a look here. So. Just use the Ubuntu one and see if we have a report for the same test failing over here that we've seen a bunch of times now recently.
You're probably speaking of this. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let me zoom a bit more here for all the.
I will also put ourselves to the other side.
Yeah. Yes. So. Let's see how we can explain this. So what would happen normally when you run this test locally? Is that we have this we have a test where we are asserting something happened during a run, and we wanna and then we have, because we can't just have tests that wait forever, right? So we have a timeout set up. So when you do the wait for assertion, wait for element, wait for something to happen to your stuff, then we have to sort of set a timeout in bUnit, because otherwise you would risk. Your message is covering your head.
Yeah,
face.
that's quite amusing.
Hey,
hello.
Yeah. So obviously we have a timeout, right? And when you're running locally on a reasonably fast machine, that timeout, which by default I think is 1 second in bUnit, but it can be. You can change it to whatever you want. You can override it. But in our test, we have it set to 1 second. Now, if we change that timeout for this particular test that keeps failing, maybe set it to 10 seconds, then it might actually just pass most of the time. But that's no guarantee. So the thing is, timeout is based on timers in .NET. Are your tests of the test runners my test runners failing? Maybe. We have seen sometimes that. I think, Stephen, you can talk about that. That was the thing where with the new .NET 9 runtime, sometimes the test would just, even though all the tests pass, the test run would still fail because of error code or something.
We had this once, and so we had to toggle to the old way of reporting things. Yeah.
So no, this is particular is kind of expected. So what's going on is that when you set a timer on any platform, I think unless you have a real-time operating system, which most of us doesn't, when you set a timer and you say, well, call me back in 1 second, right? And it's not a C# or a .NET specific thing. This is sort of a general programming thing. So if you say say to us to your scheduler, whatever it might be in your runtime operating system, give me a call back in 1 second or 1 minute or whatever amount of time you want. The only guarantee you are likely getting from whatever runtime you have is that callback will not happen before 1 second if you're asked to call you back in 1 second. It might happen after 2 seconds, 3 seconds, or 5 seconds, or the process might crash and it never happened because you are running on a OS, a machine that might not give your particular process any processing time when it's time for the timer to be invoked. So what we see here is actually exactly this. We are running on and obviously this is more, it's gonna diverge less from the expected timeout time the slower machine is, or the more work the machine is doing, right? So what we see here is the reason why this test is failing is not because it wouldn't eventually succeed if we just waited longer. It's because we said, well, we're only gonna wait 1 second. And then we can see how many times did we actually perform the check for this assertion. Well, we didn't actually get to perform it at all. We performed 0 checks. So we never actually got any CPU time assigned to us that allows us to perform the check. The render count of the component was just 1, which means that we only render the component one time initially. And the total renders for the full run of the test, sometimes you might have multiple components in play and they can render different amount of times. So when this test is being run locally on your machine, you would see total component render, it would render twice. And it's on the second render that we actually get to meet our assertion and our assertion will pass. But what happens is because we have a timeout of 1 second and is running on a particularly slow CI pipeline, the test just fails after 1 second or sometime after that, and it never actually got the CB, the bUnit or Blazor renderer never actually got a chance to re-render the component and update it so that the changes we are expecting to find shows up. So it's not that there's something wrong with the test, it's more that we don't really have a way to express currently in bUnit that, hey, you should wait this amount of time, or you should wait till after at least a number of renders have happened, and if the assertion doesn't pass after these amount of renders, then there's something wrong.
Yeah. Maybe a small amendment to the comment, like isn't adding timers of any kind to tests a pretty bad anti-pattern, gives you a very flaky test. In general, yes, but I mean, this is a bit two-dimensional because we are offering timers, what Iggy said earlier, because you want to have basically a safety net that your test is not running indefinitely. So the default is 1 second.
Yeah. So
exactly. The default is 1 second.
You are exactly right, Stephen. And what's going on here isn't that so in classic UI testing, you would have to, for example, in Xamarin, and Playwright actually does this automatically for you behind the scenes, because you have your backend code, in this case Blazor, that is generating markup, and front-end code is not able to see when there's a change. So it just has to pull the DOM and ask, is that changed now? And then wait maybe 50 milliseconds, which I believe is the default for Playwright. And then it asks again, and is it changed there now? In bUnit, we actually have deep hooks into the renderer. So whenever there is a render, whenever your component has gone through it's uninitialized, on parameter sets, on after render, actually not after render, that's a different deal. Basically, whenever it's gone through a render cycle and updated the markup for a component that you're testing, it can pause and it will tell us, hey, if you have any waiters, as we call waitFors, any things that are waiting for a change in the markup, go and check your assertions now. Which means that if we have something that goes very fast, where it first switches, the current count goes from 0 to 1, and then you click it immediately after to 2, then in a Playwright test, you might actually not get to observe it being at 1, because it might switch faster than the interval for Playwright is. So we don't really have that problem in bUnit. Now, my whole spiel about timers and scheduling on processors and getting processor time was sort of me trying to explain the reason why that this fails is because the timer times out. But the reason why it failed was because that the bUnit renderer for this particular test that it's trying to run didn't get any processor time. So it didn't actually get to re-render or render the component the second time that would cause the test to pass before the timeout happened. So yeah, ideally we could, if I went in and changed the timeout to 30 seconds for this particular test, the test would pass, and it would probably pass maybe after 1 or 2 seconds because the processor that's running the pipeline is busy running other tests as well concurrently. So what we can do, so typically what happens if we don't run into the timeout issue we have here is that bUnit test will run only as long, we would only wait exactly as long as we need to after a render has happened and the assertion passes, and then we can stop waiting. So the timeout is just sort of a catch-all, and you would typically configure that in your test to say, well, okay, the thing is, if you have a mistake in your code, you run the test and it renders and it's idle and doesn't do anything, and you don't have a timeout, the test will just hang around for until the test process, which I believe is 1 hour by default, until that sort of gives up and say, okay, nothing's happening here, let's kill it, right? So the timeout is for you to control, to say, well, if this hasn't happened within 30 seconds, or in our case, 1 second, then we probably have a mistake that we need to go fix. Now, the more overloaded CI pipelines are, the less likely it is that in this particular case, in our case at least, that 1 second is not enough, right? So that got me thinking when I realized this would be an issue, because I looked at how many times does it actually render. Oh, it only renders 1. And that's also why we added this output to the error, just to give us some indication, hey, did we actually, if it said it had rendered twice, then there would be a mistake in the code, because then it actually did do the thing it did, and then, we never got to see the expected output. So I think for wait for and the other related wait for methods, my idea is to add not a timeout, but also give us the ability to say you can wait. You basically not waiting for some time to pass and then some state to match up. We are waiting for a number of renders, and after those numbers of renders, we would want to see the result. If we don't see the result after a number of renders, we can kind of assume that there's something going on that's wrong. Now, I hope that makes sense, Stephen. Just interrupt me.
For me, that makes sense. But okay, I also know your pull request.
Yeah. So the next problem I have, though, is the amount of times a component has to re-render to get to a specific visible state from a UI perspective, to something that the user will see when they're interacting with your component, right? It's kind of an implementation detail, right? If it takes 2 or 3 or 4 re-renders of a component to move elements around on screen and display something to the user, I really don't, from a maintainability and stability of my tests, I really don't want to have that be it's like hard coding implementation detail into your test, and that is generally a bad idea to do. But so my current PR.
So the reason right now that we didn't expose it, because this information, as you can see, we have it since a while. Yeah. We are tracking the number of render counts for individual component or the render itself, but we are not really exposing it to users.
No. But I'm sort of getting to a point where I think it's valuable to do so. Let me see. So I'm just looking over here.
So exactly, the number of renders is probably more stable. And I guess you still want to have something like a timeout because, maybe something changed, you updated the library, you updated your code, and you still don't want to run your tests multiple hours straight.
No. So what I did is, and I do this quite often when I want to get back to something I had worked on, and let me zoom in. I use, by the way, I use Fork a lot, and one of the, so it's a nice tool, but this is the commit I have up on GitHub, and I just right-clicked here and say, basically reset my branch to here and keep the changes. So now all the changes we have are now unstaged, and then you can go into Visual Studio and say, only show me the, let me open my Zoom tool here, only show me the changed files. So that allows me to sort of understand what is, what were we actually working on. It's been 14 days since we looked at this last time.
Let me switch our sides.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you show it again? Our pictures were on top.
All right, let's see. So I see Findal is here, let's say. So sorry, I just got, number sounds more stable. Doesn't matter if your test run is slow or molasses. Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking, so the reason why I'm going a bit slow is because I'm trying to remember what I was thinking plus 14 days ago. So it's a bit far gone. So I think I have an implementation in our wait for where we can basically say, hey, either wait for a number of renders or wait until a timeout happens. And so that there's some changes I've done here that should work around these things. But instead of, so you can see we have two inputs now. We have a timeout or we have a max render count. I am thinking that this should probably just be an object, like a config object, so we can add or remove properties to it without, if we find a different variation at some point where we want another parameter, another condition we want to control the waiting or other things with. So I think we're getting to a point where this could just be a config object that you can pass in. Maybe using the configuration pattern, and so instead of keep adding more parameters to our properties, because this is a breaking. It's not a breaking change, but it can have a little bit. It can have bigger impact than if we had a wait options object that we can just add properties to, right? So, and it's a bit cleaner than having things be nullable and then order starts mattering, and if you want to attach. So that's one thing I think that's worthwhile investigating for this PR to solve this. I also think we might have different options where you can say, have I submitted to, I just did, because Jimmy Engström pinged me earlier today and said, have you submitted? So I said, it's on my to-do list, and then I did it. So yeah, I have submitted for Svituk in Stockholm in February. Let's see if they can actually, if they actually want me to show up again. I think if my sessions fit into the theme, I'll probably have a decent chance. Yeah. So what was I saying? Yeah, I think we need to brainstorm a bit and play around with, do we want to have a combination of both saying, well, if the amount of renders doesn't happen because there is actually a bug in the code, right? Then we don't want to wait. We don't want to block the test to chill time out, right? So we probably want to support a mix of, right now it says max render counts, and after these amounts of renders, it's gonna fail if it hasn't passed the assertion yet, whatever you're trying to do. But we might also have a minimum render count that needs to happen, and then we start a timer after that. So I don't know if it makes sense what I'm saying, but yeah, we need to sort of have maybe different combinations of reasons for saying, hey, this test probably failed, right? And if we can do so in a way that means that people don't fall into the trap of hard coding a specific amount of renders in their tests, I think that's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Especially because, as you said earlier, that I would consider this an implementation detail to a greater extent. The amount, what if you change something, if this, sometimes it gets batched together, sometimes it doesn't get batched together. So knowing the amount of renders is tricky and may or may not change across different Blazor, renderer versions. So if you go from .NET 8 to .NET 9, that can change. Yeah. So your test breaks just by, you didn't change anything, you just upgraded. Everything should work as expected, but your test is failing because the renderer changed.
Yeah. Or we could scrap having this feature altogether and maybe improving on the exception message saying, hey, if try increasing the timeout or setting a higher default timeout, so you avoid this issue, right? But so yeah, but actually, so it's not random, and depending on your logic, it might actually do something in prod. Yeah, the thing is, the Blazor renderer might sometimes batch renders together, especially when we have async code in the mix. Sometimes you might have a condition where the task that you are waiting in your Blazor code is completing faster, maybe because the results are cached or something, and sometimes it will have to actually go and do async work. So that will change it can change the render count, but it can also be that you just have, like, if you take the classic, what is it? I think we have it on the bUnit website demo. Like, we have the counter component, right? And you change an implementation details that causes it to take 2 renders for the current count to be incremented before. Maybe it goes to the database and saves, and then it shows like a spinning thing, and then it comes back. And you've written a test that just verifies that the current count gets incremented correctly. And that test, and from the user's point of view, they don't really care how many renders again, it's implementation details. We want to avoid having dependencies in those in our tests. But so I don't know what you think, Stephen. I think it's maybe something that should, like the ability to wait for a minimum amount of render counts or a max count, and then you give up. Mm-hmm. Because it can be sort of if you have a test that's problematic, right? If you have a test that's problematic, and you kind of need a way out, right? So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the problem with the minimal amount of renders is that particular instance you showed earlier, that particular test, you would suffer basically by just defining a minimal amount of renders, maybe, if you screw up your test. So then you're also just running hours. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, there needs to be a hard stop anyway.
Yeah.
Let's just quickly sidetrack. So, I'm gonna butcher that name. It's a lovely name. Peculiar, of course. Bobalala. So is bUnit a test framework like XUnit? No, it's a library. So it's a library you add to your tests project. So if you have an XUnit test project or an NUnit MS test, or there's a new thing called TUnit.
TUnit.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch.
It doesn't make it easier for us, by the way.
No. Well, we are squatting on bUnit. Like, we have, if we go to nougat.org and go to bUnit, like, nobody else is going to be able to publish a package called bUnit, because this is you can see that's this star here. It's a reserved prefix. It's mine. I own it. So nobody's gonna steal bUnit.
You paid dearly for it.
Anyway, yeah, probably I sold my soul and thirdborn to Microsoft to get that. No, so bUnit is a library like MOQ or Fluent Assertions or whatever other libraries you might be using together with your testing frameworks. So it's a library that allows you to test Blazor components in isolations and controlled.
You can turn it around. You can have Tyndall.bUnit. Yes, as a prefix, it's not allowed, but you can use it as a suffix. That is.
Yeah.
We cannot do much against that.
No. So we control anything that starts with bUnit dot, similar to what you can't push NuGet packages that start with Microsoft dot, or probably others as well. So yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so
yes, we are a library like how is it called in the React world? Damn it. Testing library. It's called testing library. It's super easy, and I forgot. So yeah, back to your question. Yes, which way do we want to go? Do we want to have both? Do we want to have only one flavor? I have a tool called .NET Bacon. I was like .NET Bacon, not Beacon, Bacon. That's true, yeah. But .NET, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought .NET it might be also reserved.
It is reserved. Prefix. He says he had to rename it. I'm fairly certain that it's the whole reserved prefixes thing was something that was added in a couple of years ago. So probably when they started reserving the Microsoft specific prefixes, they went around and poked the folks that had conflicting names and asked them to kindly rename. Yeah.
So yeah, back to the question of whether or not max render count. My issue in this particular instance is what exactly here. If we go to one of those failing tests, and you could argue you do not know which test is failing. That is somewhat arbitrary, given where the CPU is right now struggling. It could be any of our 9,000 tests we have.
Exactly. So if we go and find this particular one here,
my problem is like it's more like a patch.
Yes.
You have to patch almost every test, or you set it globally, like you set the timeout globally as well. That's also an option.
Well,
you could also argue. No, that's the implementation.
Mm-hmm. Here we go. 75. Oh. Oh, it's in the
exactly
wrong,
where the...
Yeah, I copied the wrong file name. God damn it.
Yeah. I do not know.
I'm going to zoom out a bit so I can actually find my way around here. Let's see.
Yeah, this one. Markup
matches render. There we go, yeah. This one. Stop being over here, come over here, and then it was line 17. There we go. Yeah. So here we have max render count set to 2, and because I'm expecting to see 2 renders before my assertion is met, and you can see here in the exception that we only got 1. Now, what would probably also fix this would be, again, using timeout and saying time span from seconds and setting that to, I don't know, some arbitrary. But then there's this nagging thing inside me saying, yeah, I could set it to 1 minute or 10 minutes, right? And it will work. But then there's going to be that one time where the CI server is completely bonkers, right? And it actually still fails because it never got to render the second time it needed to render.
Yeah. How is it? I checked the pull request like 2 weeks ago. How is currently the implementation? If you set the max render count to a value, what happens to the timeout?
The timeout isn't in play. So if you look
completely
at the
not. So it doesn't matter.
Well,
this
caveat.
is my second. Okay.
Yeah. Caveat.
That's why.
So that
would be my second.
Yeah. Get runtime timeout. You can see here what we're doing is, by the way, if you have debugger attached, we disable timeout because then your test is failing after a few seconds and you don't get to step in. That's so annoying. So that's a good trick, by the way. If you have any timeout stuff in your code, you can always do this. So when you're debugging, you don't get to fight with the timeout. What we have here is if max render count has a value, we just set a default timeout to something quite high, 1 minute. Again, but that, it still nags me. It might still take more than 1 minute for the render to actually complete if it's running on a really, really slow machine, or this machine is just busy with something else. Like if you have one core and you have some code that is just spinning away and not releasing the CPU, right? And it's just blocking access to it. Like if you go into, into Task Manager, and you go in and right click and say, I want to give this maximum priority, right? So in theory, it could still happen.
Yeah, exactly. Right? This is a problem. I mean, this issue. I know we had this earlier. Not as earlier. We had some not leaks, but the logging wasn't really in place. You fixed that quite nicely. But sometimes this popped up also earlier, and always the issue was our machines were too beefy to reproduce the issue.
Yeah, locally.
Locally. So if you have, I feel like if you have a dual core CPU, which isn't shared with some other people, then, it's really, really, really hard to have this issue locally.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, that's why, but having it, so locally those tests normally run in the realm of milliseconds. Pushing the boundary to over minutes is like magnitude 3 more, which is so weird. Yeah, you peasants. Exactly, that's always my point of view. Just buy more hardware. Just bare metal. Just
usually obviously. Actually, so you joke, but sometimes, especially back in the 2000s, where you would just get 100% more performance every 18 months. When you had some software we couldn't really figure out how to make get to run faster, you just told your manager, hey, I come back in 18 months, I will have it running twice as fast, right? And it just upgrade the CPU and problem solved. So So I feel so.
I do think it's the right direction. It could be wrong. What bugs me a bit is that you have invariations, which make absolutely no sense. So what if I define both values? There's a hidden truth that says, okay, the max render count overrides your timeout.
Yeah. I am not sure why it's complaining right now. The name. Maybe.
Did you change something?
I don't think so.
Given that it's just a git reset soft. You changed that. No. Yes, you changed. There was a. Did we change it?
I added something up here. Okay, So it should be fine. Now, so if you go back and have a look at the test in particular here, right? So what we could definitely be like, I could also write this saying 5, right? And that would protect against. I'm removing implementation details from my test in this particular case, to some extent saying that I am going to wait for up to 5 render cycles, and if it hasn't shown up by then. But then again, if the component, and in this case, I guess I need to go up. So annoying.
I like that comment, like developer time versus more hardware is always a balance, yes.
Yeah. Actually, let me go and delete my VS.
Where I'm always more prone to, if developing time or developing experience is better, more often than not, I would, lean towards that. What did you change? Sorry, I wasn't really.
No, I'm just VS has cached some, things that are generated. So I'm just going to delete my VS folder and open it up again.
Okay.
Where did we go? We went here. So now I should start and stop showing warnings where there isn't any. Yeah, so it's sort of a balancing act, because if I set it to 5 and the test will only cause the component to render exactly 2, then it will have, and there's a mistake that causes to render twice, but then never actually match what we have in what we're expecting.
Then it will just sit there until the
it will
timeout
sit there
comes.
up until the like upper timeout limit, right? But then
exactly.
then I guess, yeah, I'm just really debating.
I really have to say I like the minimum amount more right now than the maximum amount. Well, not even
what
that.
would
It's like,
yeah. So what would happen? So we have to think through the logic. So hey, we can, without really tying into implementation details. What is up with? Oh, it's yeah.
What?
This is because
that's the second argument. Yeah.
this is a second change I did because I want to basically run a test, and if it fails before the test exits and all my resources get disposed, I just create a dump, so I could actually debug what was going on because I wanted to capture a memory dump of all the processes and all the state of the thing before the test context is disposed, which actually holds a render that is doing something blocked. So this was sort of a way for me to debug the whole thing. Now, if we say you should render a minimum of twice, because we know we're rendering this component, that's one render cycle, and then we are doing something, and by the way, so then we are asserting that it says loading, and then our act step is to trigger something in the injected component state that would then cause it to complete, and then asynchronously we have to wait for this to sort of go into the component, cause it to re-render again. So here I can, at least in our specific case, and this is probably something that's going to be useful for people who are building component libraries, because they are thinking about components in isolations versus if you're testing sort of a more broader scope where you're just testing a Blazor application, for example, through bUnit. So here it's quite like we expect as a bit would be a range. So here it's quite clear that it should be at least 2, right? Because this is a one render, then we have a second render course triggered by this, and then so it should be at least 2.
The thing which bugs me a bit is the name render count. I mean, technically this is correct, but if I mean, I'm not a component library dude, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think of it more as a state change, whatever state means. Observable, visible state change, because that's what you should, more or less. I mean, no, that's also not true. If you have a component library, you also want to observe the internal state, and that's why we expose the instance.
Not necessarily, but yes. So this is sort of more an advanced thing that we can have, I guess. And I think I'm leaning towards, even though it's, I guess we try quite hard in bUnit to have people fall into the pit of success and not write tests that are actually going to be hard for them to maintain and bad long run wise, right? We want them to
I have an
yeah, go ahead.
Instead of having WaitForAssertion or WaitForState offering this overload with a max render count or min render count, it doesn't matter right now.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it make more sense to have it as its own method, waitFor, which has its own timeout you can set, which has already a sensible default, and if you think of, okay, at least there has to be 2 renders and 2 renders are gone already or done already, you will pass that method immediately, so there's no overhead or a minimal amount of overhead. We're talking nanoseconds to microseconds.
Hang on, I have somebody knocking at my door.
Yes, the cool thing is now, so everyone who's watching, yes, that camera is following. If you can see it right now, that's really interesting. So it has these AI cameras, and sometimes you can see on the right side of the Quake picture he has, you cannot see it right now because it's blurred, you can see the camera is just zooming and zooming, and this is really cool. But anyway, yes, so if while he's not listening, my idea would be having, as you can see on line 27, you have WaitForAssertion until the markup matches the expectation you set in there. But it would be also nice to say just before, okay, CUT, component under test, wait for render, wait for minimal amount of render, maximum amount of render. It doesn't really matter. That's just semantics. And in both cases, it's more of an advanced thing. And probably we should make it internal for ourselves first and test this. And if the test is fast enough, aka locally, or you have a beefy machine, it should pass immediately, and another WaitForAssertion on line 27 would also pass immediately. So the overhead of this is small. I feel the semantics would be better because you can give it. So I explained just my thoughts, but I can explain it to you once again. You're muted, by the way. You're muted.
That doesn't help either. All right, yeah. Let me have it. Let me have it.
So line 27 right now is WaitForAssertion, where you say, hey, my component under test has to match my expectation. And then you say max render count.
Yeah.
But my idea would be on line basically 26 right now, have something like cut.waitFor. Now we can decide maximum amount of renders or minimal amount of renders. And there you can define also a timeout optionally. We can say, okay, it's 5 seconds or so.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. And there are like two cases. Cases one, let's say you have locally a beefy machine like we do have. Yes, I'm bragging. I do know. So this line would immediately probably pass because those renders are done immediately.
Yeah.
So the overhead is very, very slim. And then line 27, your WaitForAssertion would immediately pass because the
it still passes. Yeah,
exactly. So and it would take away all the ambiguity between the timeout you have right now and the second parameter. Even if you do what you're doing right now, it is ambiguous what will happen. It's not clear. Because one will win. But who wins is an implementation detail we decide for the user. Yes, we can document that, obviously.
Yeah. We would document, and I think one thing that could also be made visible is, so to my point was, if right now, if you want to discover what the defaults are, you have to read the documentation. If we switch to having sort of, you can pass in a lambda like this, where you can set options. So if you do this, it's sort of like a configuration pattern we have in ASP.NET Core and many places, right? You would also have a wait options dot timeout, and you could just go in, and if you do this, you would actually see what the default is because it's already set, right? It's there, the value is there. The render count would be annullable, right? So it would be default to null or to nothing, but there would be a default timeout of 5. Now, why I also like this is that users can create this lambda and store it somewhere, so they can just reuse that whole thing in each of their tests.
But here, to make that somewhat useful, you also have to define a max render count timeout. And this is where I think it's ambiguous.
So I agree. Yeah. This was just like talking about the current setup, right? Where we have where we have different overloads of them. But instead of having, as you can see in my diff on the PR, I had to create a whole bunch of additional overloads just to be able to support the various combinations of. So most of the changes were actually not in the core method, but it was all in the extension methods where we just add different combinations of passing in max render count, passing in a timeout, and then there's so this would sort of reduce the amount of overloads to saying, hey, these are the wait options. Obviously, because we have timeout already in the API, not to break people, we would have to create the options overload here and then keep the original timeout overload around so we don't have any breaking changes. But at least for V2, we can just stick with the one instead of having. And I think it's a quite common pattern. We also see that in Playwright, for example, they would have these options arguments that you can use to customize the thing that is happening instead of having it be just parameters and you have to add new parameters every time. I think this is a nice from an API design and maintainability point of view, for us and for the user, I think this is a good way and it's quite discoverable.
You could even go further and say, like, what you can also do with a lot of things in ASP.NET that you have this configuration via the dependency container that you say configure, and then you have a global option, and that global option is respected by wait for XXX.
Yeah, and that might be something we say we have, if we have the test context, it might have default wait configuration. That would be new wait option, right? The default options that get passed in here with some value, right? So it gives us ability to add new defaults to places without actually continuously adding new properties to test context, right? For example, that has a bunch of, it has the default wait. So it that sort of API design wise, I think a good idea for us to investigate. Now, you could say that like we have max render count as in how many times do I want to wait before I give up? Or you could, if you used, and I think my first attempt as this was actually using min render count, which I also found, and I think remember you mentioned that in one of your PR comments, that why does it say min here when it's max, and it was confusing. And that's because I started out trying to do min. But the thing is, if you have min render count, you always have to have a timeout as well. Because if you say, I want to wait for at least 2 render cycles, then there might be 0 more render cycles that happens after that. But I guess in either case, you need to have a timeout. And I was also thinking about something along the lines of saying, after my min render count, if we say the minimum render count is 2, because then that it's you are being less precise in your test, which means it leaves you the option of being more flexible with your refactoring of production codes, implementation details, and not breaking your test, right? So you don't have to update your test. But if we say, so what you could do is you could have a timeout, and we could have a rule, whether this is min or max, saying if this is defined, we wait for if it's min render count, we wait for up till the minimum render count, and after the minimum render count has been reached, we start the timer. So the timer is more, it doesn't have to be like a completely unrealistic value of 1 minute, which can still fail either way. But if we at least reach the minimum render count at that point, there might be more renders coming, but it's probably a mistake in the test or the production code, and it needs to be fixed, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if we are concluding anything. Oh man. I think.
Well, I would start as minimal as possible. I wouldn't put the minimal around in. I don't think we need this right now.
No.
Like, at least for our problem, and no one else asked until now, our problem is more or less solved with the solution you're proposing right now.
Well, it would also be solved if we just set the timeout much higher than we have.
True.
Yes.
True.
So, what you could also say is that the max render count is kind of an unexpected. It's almost an assertion in itself, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, what you're saying is also, I expect this amount of renders to happen in this particular scenario. And it could be something where we don't have it as explicitly as a wait option. And honestly, you could do cut dot. Well, no, yeah. So
we can, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can access the render count. I believe it's actually being exposed through.
Is it?
I think so. I'm fairly sure.
I thought always this is an internal property.
Oh, it's here.
Yeah. But is this internal?
Oh, it's part of the interface.
Oh no. Okay. I apologize.
Shame on you, man.
Yes, sir.
Give me 10 strongs on the floor now. Yeah, no. No, it's.
But is there then a need for all of this?
But here, now we get back. Now we get back to the core issue. I think is that you can have a very slow machine, and the timeout might happen before the render count that you expect to happen has happened. So I think there's two angles. I know this test is correct, but sometimes it fails because it doesn't get the CPU time it needs to actually complete before the timeout gives up on it. And then there's the second thing, which our change right now. So the change we have, I proposed, that would solve that issue, right? Saying you have to wait for at least 2 max render counts and then some large timeout. So that would be solved by us knowing the test is correct and it's just a matter of CPU cycles. But the other variant is that there's a wrong, that the test is wrong, or the production code is wrong, and the production code is wrong from time to time.
The test is read for all the good reasons.
The test is read, and maybe it can also be it's not consistently read. It can be read. So maybe there is other timer-based stuff or async stuff going on in test that causes the test to fail in production on a slow machine. But it's not because you're not waiting long enough or waiting for the right amount of renders. It's just because there's something there you need to fix. And either, I guess people would understand. So this doesn't solve that. But the question, would this change hurt that scenario for people? I probably want to say no. That's not going to hurt them. If you go back here to the...
Yeah, well, it doesn't hurt because it's anyway optional.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Did I go to the wrong... I wanted to go back to the actual output for the test. Go back to checks here. Being a bit slow, GitHub. Go here. Go... That's
why the test is failing.
Exactly. The root cause.
Remove unused. I guess this is a... What is... There are like some analyzer issues with this one. Or? Yeah, some analyzer issues.
Doesn't allow me to scroll all of a sudden in the test output. What's going on here? Run tests. What? Okay. Now I'm confused. Oh, it's because... Oh, never mind. It's because I went in the wrong... Looking in the right. Let's go back to this one. Yeah. It's Friday, folks. It's been a long week. Here we go. This actually runs. Yeah. Okay. So... So I think there's two attack fronts here. This error message... The assertion did not pass within the timeout period. I think what we can do is we can improve on that. So that we have the check count. How many times did we actually perform? I think this is wrong because we always perform the check immediately. But I think actually it probably... What actually probably happened is that we got into the waitFor method and scheduled the timer, but we never got to the point where we could actually perform the check. So we haven't even performed the check once. So I think a few things...
Isn't that something synchronously we do always before we start even the timer?
Apparently not. Either we're not incrementing the check count, which I do think we are. So I think it actually hasn't performed the check, because that's always something you do immediately before you even start. There's no reason to wait if the condition is already there. So I think there's two approaches I want to take to this. I want to improve this message to sort of somehow, and we can write a half of a novel here, just explaining that if it might be because you have a mistake in your code, right? Or it could be that you need to increase the timeout, or if you can analyze your test and say that I expect a minimum amount of a maximum amount of renders to happen, then you probably want to check how many times did I actually render. And if this doesn't match, that's a hint to where the problem might lie, right? So I want to give a more helpful exception message here, so people will start thinking about not just using the default timeout or wait for options, but do something custom, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that can help alleviate some of the problems if they get a more helpful error message, exception message here. And then I think I want to change the PR such that we have not another overload that takes another argument, another overload takes another argument, but being wait options instead of just a double or integer as it is.
But do you want to do this on V1 or wouldn't that be easier on V2?
I think I want to do it on V1 because it's also giving us issues on V1, our release pipeline, and then I want to drop the overload that just takes a time span in V1 in V2, so we just have the wait options in V2.
So wait, just to completely understand. So you still want to have the max render count, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I do think it can add value, even though with all the caveats, and we can write that in the code docs, saying be aware that you are adding implementation details to your test code from your production code. The amount of render counts is potentially an implementation detail. So
fair, since I always thought the render count on iRendered component is internal, but apparently it's not. Therefore, people can already do this. There's absolutely no one holding you back. Exactly.
Cut.render count bigger than X. But then again, the timeout. So if you say it has to be bigger than 2 and this has to match, well, the thing is.
But then it's nice because it's not. Then you can set the timeout yourself, and that there's no. It's not ambiguous.
Yeah,
you know exactly what's going on.
The timeout still need to match. Still need to be more than your CI pipelines.
Yeah, exactly. You have to increase it in any case. Yeah. But we also have to do this in theory now.
Yes, but
we do this also to indefinite right now.
Yeah.
We did this.
And I would not have an assertion explicitly saying, hey, we need to have more than 2, or less than 2, or whatever, because I think the wait options max render count, I think it makes more sense because it's not a direct assertion, but it's sort of an indication that if it hasn't happened by now, then you probably want to give up.
But the max render count alone it's just a side effect. The only thing that really fixes something is because of the increased timeout. Max render count alone will not solve any issue in this moment, at least for our test. I'm not sure what it really fixes or makes it better. What if you drop it? What's the situation if we just say, hey, we go through our own test suite and take the increased timeout? Is there anything which we wouldn't solve? Was there anything?
This would solve it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe I'm back full circle and just realizing that this. So maybe the PR should not be to add a new overload, but it should be to expand on the exception message we're getting here to say, hey,
good.
So saying, hey, if you're seeing this and you're not seeing the render counts you expect in the output, or even the check count that you expect, then you probably want to increase the wait time because, and then reasons, and then drop adding this extra functionality here because I think that might be the right approach, honestly, because I think my whole motivation for wanting to go over this with you is because I had that feeling that this is not a slam dunk. Like it adds. But we can't really. We can't.
Not a 3-pointer.
No, exactly. There's things here that where you can sort of kind of feel that it's a band-aid, but is it even the right band-aid, right?
Yeah, that's good that we went through. I mean, I just approved it because I felt like,
Yeah,
if you think of it shallow,
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, if you think of it on a shallow level, it looks nice,
Yeah.
It somewhat fixes that, but the thing it fixes is it's just more this increased timeout and only the increased timeout. The only thing which the max render count will help you at some point is if you have real timers in place. You don't fake or mock timers. So you have a lot of state changes over time. If you have a very, I don't know, you set the interval very slow, very, how do you call it? Narrow? Damn it, It's really Friday. Thank you very much. Maybe then, you can say, like, okay, if it doesn't do that thing in 10 render counts, then something is really, really, really off.
Yeah, so I think that you have a point there, because the thing is, render counts between executions of the same code is, if you run the test locally on your machine and we run it up in the cloud, a render count is likely going to be stable unless you really try to trick the
timers
render.
might be really something.
Yeah, but then, so the timers, to go back to my explanation of how timers work originally.
Exactly, that's
where it started.
Yeah, task delay, task yield.
Yeah, some of those, like but even so, you have to be quite aggressive with Blazor to cause it to.
Yeah.
I think when we analyzed back a couple of years ago how the renderer behaves, the batching of renders is probably unlikely to happen in scenarios in bUnit tests, where you have something that you control from the outside. So I think the advantage, the idea of having max render count, if it's a different metric in terms of waiting. I want to wait for this amount of render count before I give up. And then with just a upper limit. But then again, you have I think timeout. You can also set a timeout here and just say, I don't know if it takes a time span or it takes milliseconds, right? So you can also have XUnit. Yeah, exactly. So XUnit can also just kill your test after a certain amount of time if things haven't gone your way, right? So, so to some extent, having a timeout here is an implementation detail also leaking out, because timeout timeout, and especially dealing with async stuff, that is something that can change between runs of the tests. Whereas if you haven't changed your production code, haven't changed your test code, it is very, very likely that the same render count will happen every time, given that the runtime gets enough time to actually complete the renders. So render count is to some extent more stable metric compared to using timeouts.
But it's a less graspable one for someone.
Yes. Yeah.
So just imagine you have your component, you just look at the code and you see this render count 4.
And maybe we want to change that to render cycles instead of count, because I think people understand that they have lifecycle methods.
My problem is more that if you look at the component, and that component has, for example, some async call, like an HTTP call, but you mock that HTTP call so it returns a task from result.
Yeah.
Then the render count will be different in your test versus your production code. Or render cycles. It doesn't matter in this term. Like that potato.
Yeah, correct.
So whatever happens in production is not necessarily what happens in tests. So I'm not sure how easy it is for folks to grasp how many render cycles a component will undergo while you running your tests. Obviously, as if you stick to as much as possible to synchronous code, probably it's easier.
Yeah, but if you have synchronous code, you are almost never going to need wait for. Actually,
Yes.
this is actually synchronous code in a sense that we have a task completion source, we set result,
Yeah.
then the block task
true.
in the loading component completes. You can see what it really does is just waits for his and then sets done. That causes a new render cycle to start. But there's no, the asynchronous is just a task that is parked and not doing anything. Right.
Yeah.
So in a sense, yeah, it is synchronous. Okay, so I think
So we're cycling back and forth.
yeah, no. So for me, it's also I think this is the fun part to some extent of designing a library.
To be honest,
Hey, hello, Fuel Snable.
you can. So while I also agree,
Welcome
with
to
you
Indecision 2024 in bUnit.
while I also agree to you that time span might be an implementation detail, I would argue in a different way. It's just a safety net, and it was always designed to be one. And well, makes sense.
Yeah, and it's a common concept from testing saying, well, I expect something to happen, but if it hasn't happened in, timeout, into a timeout here, then we can go on. Whereas,
Yep.
yeah, no, I think what we want to do is we want to update our message so that we basically the hint. I think what we want to tell people is that if you there's two things. So the render count here, right? You can see the output we have here. You can look at that, and then you can run your test locally, put breakpoints in, and then check how many. Or you can also do, like, if you get to the assertion here, cut, and you say render count. If you want to debug this, you would inspect this variable after your assertion passes locally on your machine where it works. And the render count is 2, as it is in this particular case. Well, and you see up on your CI pipeline that it says it only rendered once. Well, there's a hint that it's because your timeout is too low. If the render count matches up on the server, it says 2, and it says 2 locally when it works, then the fault might be somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, I just checked quickly on Grab app. Are folks really overwriting that timeout? And it's so rare that people are doing that. So you just look for WaitForAssertion or WaitForState.
I'm gonna share your screen.
Exactly. That's right. Sorry, So I'm just looking for. So who doesn't know the app? But Grab app is very, very nice because you can just grab over basically GitHub repositories. You can just use case sensitivity. You can use regular expressions or whatnot. So if you find yourself having a function and you don't know about context of a function, I always use this exactly for that reason. And here, for example, even the component libraries like MudBlazer, if you just check, they never ever define a timeout, which I do think is a good job from basically you that they don't need this. There's one here.
Do they set the default, override the default timeout from the test context?
God, how was it called? Just default?
I can't remember. Yeah, you probably want to serve for something more bUnit specific. Let's see.
Exactly.
Test context base. And that has something called default wait timeout. Default wait timeout.
The inception. Yeah, no one. Well, they don't set it. We set it. Obviously. Then I argue that is absolutely not bUnit related. Well, these ones.
But we can see we are not the only one that has this problem in terms of testing.
Default and second. So yeah, basically, and this one here, no. So no one set. I mean, I'm not sure what Grab app really looks through which repositories, but I would assume
probably the ones that are popular or open.
Yeah,
exactly. Rather not popular, but
the license has to be right.
I think so.
So
it has to be a public repository. Probably that's the limit.
Yeah. And then if I check, for example, WaitForState, which is less common than WaitForAssertion. Also here, people, I mean, this is probably not from us. .NET, Bluetooth, Flow Energy. Not sure if they use bUnit. Don't get me wrong, if they want to, I would be happy. Console logs, well, but that could be. It's not
Yeah,
that
no,
Aspire.
that it is bUnit. Aspire,
Yeah.
the Aspire dashboard is using bUnit to test stuff.
That said, that's for sure not bUnit. That's not bUnit. This might be bUnit, but as you can see, the timeouts, and that's me, are not really used, which is a good sign to me.
Yeah.
So while it is an implementation detail, it stays that for the majority of people.
Yeah, and the default timer that we've hard-coded is 1 second.
Yeah, exactly. Which, when we are not or most of the folks will not write end-to-end tests, which will, last a few seconds. So if you have your component in isolation and you just do a click and whatnot, it's fairly fast.
But so it's not really. No, but the thing is, it's not a bUnit issue because it's not. It's not. But it's just that at least the free runners we have up on GitHub, they run at the speed they run with. So
yeah, and they're shared, so they're just virtual CPUs.
Yeah,
that's sometimes which that's.
And actually, it matches what we've experienced previously when we had similar issues. Is that sometimes the Ubuntu runner would pass without a problem, but half of the time the Windows and Mac OS X runners would fail. And my experience is also just looking at the time it takes to run the test is that they are quite a bit slower. So that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, so I think...
I'm not sure if this helped you. I just wanted to say
No.
that,
I think it's so... I don't know if you've ever watched the API design
from the .NET team, yeah.
Yeah, from the .NET team, yeah. This is I really like this is part of it. So when you're building libraries that other people need to use, you need to make sure that you can spend 2 hours discussing small details, because as soon as we push it out to production, release a new package, we have to support it until we decide to go to deprecate the whole thing and go to V2.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that
if we see how old V1 is, and it's not like V2 is in the making and stuff, and even if V2 comes out, it's not like we immediately drop V1 support. Yeah. Or at least I don't think so.
Yeah. So, and what we can also do is we don't want to set the default wait timeout for all our tests. We can just do it one time in the constructor, right? So then that should fix that. Okay. So with that in mind, let's see, what do we have here? We have
the decisions to. Yeah, we could also rewrite this in Rust.
Yeah.
Well,
no. So I think actually, so part of the PR was this method here called dump capture.
Yeah,
which I thought was actually quite useful, and I think we're just going to leave it. It's like an internal thing in our testing library.
Because I feel like this one crashed as well.
No, we have it crashed before it started running. It was a build error. So if we had a test that actually fails, what this will do is it will run the test, and if that fails for whatever reason, timeout or something else, before we actually exit, we use this use capture jump, which basically will go in and use the .NET dump, just run the CLI command .NET dump from the current process ID and capture the dump file so that you can go and analyze that afterwards. So I think I'm gonna leave that code around. So that's part of this change here. And then we can undo the changes. Because I set it up and I saw it capture, I saw it do the thing and gave me a dump file. So that was part of my debugging step to figure out what was actually going on. So now that can be saved, but then the 2 other changes I made, we can undo those and just ignore them. So that would essentially just be to go ahead
and pick that one commit?
Just delete them changes. So yes to all, and now we go back here. Actually, this particular file, we want to go back here and set some large value because these are problematic. Do this. We don't need that anymore.
Doesn't have to be async anymore, huh?
That's true. void. And same thing here.
I'm just so interested why this component or this test in particular is so problematic. Given the likelihood of, we have so many others, there are like 2,000 tests per target framework.
I think it's just the order it runs the tests in. Because it's fairly deterministic from XUnit's point of view, what test they run at what time.
I thought that there's a seed and it's random. I thought you can set the seed in your config, so it's deterministic. But I thought the whole point is that's not deterministic, so that you don't have tests relying on each other.
So it's deterministic, as far as I understand, in a sense that it will scan through your assembly and find the test and run them in the same order. But what makes it indeterministic is that if you have async stuff, so what XUnit does is that it will try to utilize or maximize the load put on your CPU cores as much as possible. So if you have a test that does async stuff like this one, where it stops doing a thing, but it's not actually actively doing things, the XUnit will see that this async test is now in awaiting something to happen, and it will spin up a new test. So it start running the next test. But it will run a test. So all tests by default, all tests in the same collection. And our XUnit test collection is by default the test class, but you can override that as well. All the tests in here will run sequentially. So it will spin up a new test class and start running a different test once you get to an async state. Now, we might be messing that up slightly because we are actually calling get await or get assert. So we are kind of blocking, right? We're not asynchronously waiting. And that might be sort of causing issues, causing this to bubble up to the surface.
Not sure. We had a version where we made it async and it didn't really help.
No, exactly. But yeah, we have that as an internal. So it's. I didn't help because I think we weren't thinking through the problem and had that realization I had a few weeks ago where I said, okay, well, it's actually failing because it's not getting to render the amount of time we wanted to render before the assertion should pass. So, and because we still had the synchronous versions in there that were blocking, then the problems were problems.
Yeah, I can remember also some time ago, like 1 or 2 years, I tried an experiment where I just set in the XUnit runner config at most run one test, or literally just one.
Run them sequentially, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that led to just green tests all the time, predictably. Yeah. But obviously
because that single test will get enough CPU time to actually complete the work. So yeah.
I didn't know there's a max parallel threads 2 times. I didn't know that exists.
No, it's a new thing in XUnit, and they have this parallel algorithm as well set now. So you by default it's aggressive, but you can set it to conservative, and that also allows you to have behaviors closer to what NUnit does, where it doesn't run more tests than you have CPU, so you have lesser chance of one thread being starved, or rather one process or task being starved for attention. So I think these are still good defaults for us in this particular case, but it's not too far off from what it does by default. So I think this is fix, increase default timeout to allow tests renders to complete, to allow expected renders to complete.
Also the unexpected ones.
Yeah, well, so the thing is, need to start up one password. So the thing is, there won't be any more renders.
No.
In this particular case. So yeah, and I know you know. Yes, sign. Oh, yes, pin. Okay. Now I'm going to force push this branch up there. Rips. Now, then we also want to go into the wait for exception.
I have a better message.
Yes. Wait for failed exception. Is that really what we call it?
Yes. At least that was in your output earlier.
Yeah. Okay. So here we have here we have the stuff where we log how many checks we've done and so on and so forth. Let's actually go and have a look here. I want to see if the check count. So yeah, you can see we set up the timer and the callback already here. And then we create the wait task. So the create wait task is the thing that actually does the
Okay, and if it never renders, that we never let it pass. But the initial thing we do.
Wait a minute, let's see here. Initialize waiting. Here we go. Initialize waiting. This will go in call on after this will it will subscribe to on after render, and it will also perform the check. So that's why you can see in our instance, we set up the timer and we change the timer to have it start running. And then this part never happens. That is why we have a check count of 0. So yeah. So what we actually
do this initially. I thought somewhere there, basically in the constructor, checking whether or not that thing is done.
Yeah.
And if it's done, you don't have to set up the timer. You don't have to set the task completion source. You just have to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, maybe you can make this as an improvement.
So I think what we probably want is we want to put the wait task up here. We want to move this in here. And then we want to pass in the state, which is just this. So I'm just gonna make this slightly more pretty.
Then you have this, yeah,
and here we go. And then we do this equals, and that would be wait for helper of t state. And we can use stop giving me all of that. Well, we're passing it in here, so it's fairly obvious.
Yeah, we know what it is.
Yeah. So if we look at this, so here we have, now I think here before subscribing, so I guess we...
in the on after render, we check the first time.
Yeah,
because
so,
the renderer is still busy, we never enter on after render.
Yeah, no. Well, we never get to run that part of code. But I think that's probably fine because I think it's fine to set up the timer first. Now, in theory, we could save a bit of CPU cycles not allocating a timer unless do the check first and then decide to whether or not to do that. But I think
that probably doesn't work. We cannot do that, to be honest, because you might never ever enter the lambda inside invoke async. If the renderer is busy, you will never ever execute that bit of code, and therefore you would wait indefinitely before you enter the timer callback.
Yeah, I think this is right. And here, then we can amend. So there's an error message that is based on the kind of waiting you're doing, right? So here, let's do a private static. Let me extract this out into a method. extract method. Create message. Oh, delete a bit too much. So let's split it into something more readable. And so probably do environment. Actually, let's do return, and then do that. It's going to make it a bit more easy to work with. So here we start by adding in that bit. We have the error message, and then we have the current.
Yeah, exactly. This message we can just
Yeah.
be there, and then there's just amendment to that.
Yeah. Yes. So I want to make it more explicit. Yeah. And yeah, component render count. Now here we want to say something more. We want to say, we can even just put it into new lines, so to say. What is the kind of message we want to leave our users with here?
Yeah, it's a bit difficult because you don't know the exact circumstances. I mean, for us, it's not enough CPU time, but it could also be that, you know, your test code is wrong, your production code is wrong.
Yeah.
Both is wrong, none is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, something is wrong.
Something is wrong.
It might be that the assumption of what the test is
I mean, we can
supposed to do is not
say
right.
probably like check the check and render count, something like that, you know, to determine whether or not. Yeah, well,
I'm just gonna try something. Determine the.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. Yeah. Why working on our own? I mean,
You can respect the render counts
of the components involved. Yeah, components involved. Yeah, like
if this test does not fail consistently, the reason may be that the wait time out is too short and the runtime did not have enough time to complete the necessary number of renders. This can happen on slower hardware where
or if you have hardware which is under pressure.
Yeah.
Or high utilized hardware. It doesn't matter. I mean, if you have a beefy CPU, but you know, like there are 70 million things running on them. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
The render counts, I would remove there. Yeah.
To determine if this is the cause, compare the render counts below.
Render select check counts, huh? That's also good.
Yeah. Check and render counts below and see if they match the number, match what expected. We will try to write it in the same tone as we do with
Yeah.
documentation.
You have the
Yeah.
typo in before match. There is a Y missing. If they match.
If they match what is
You could remove the whole word.
if they do not consider changing the
Timeout.
timeout.
Increasing the timeout.
Yeah, increasing.
Oh, yeah. Well, why say? What was it from the office? Why say many word if?
Yeah, exactly.
Damn it! I forgot that one. Yeah, the one
Either-
from. Good. Now I have to Google. Why say many word? Ah, why say many word if few word do trick?
Test context dot default wait. Wasn't it?
Can you could use a name of in both cases?
Yeah, default.
Just
Hang
thanking
on.
our future selves. It's default. I had it, default wait timeout.
Wait. Yeah.
Kevin Malone, thank you very much. Yeah, I was just void. It was just void in my head. I just had the quote. I knew the character.
Friday.
And I was like,
Friday. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So yeah.
AKA Ashton Kutcher. Even though The Office is one of my all-time favorite TV series I watched, but even then I cannot remember on a Friday evening.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to do name off because we have nested types and stuff. So it's gonna make it
fair enough.
confusing.
Individual. Either at the individual method.
Wait for.
Assertion.
Yeah.
Wait for. I just wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe let's do example. Wait for elements, and then some div, and then time span dot from seconds 30. I don't know, 15. As an example.
42.
Yeah, 42. Wait for element. Did I spend? Is it time span with a capital? Yes.
Yes.
Time. No, it's with a capital S. Yes. Thought so. Okay.
Well, that is very expressive. I like that.
Well, I honestly I think it's good to have good exception messages that help people. If this
test singular. If I
this
can
test
be.
does not fail consistently, yeah, the reason may be that the wait timeout is too short, and the runtime did not have enough time to complete the necessary number of renders. Of the
Maybe render cycles.
components
Maybe.
under test. Yeah.
And how you utilize or slow hardware.
Yeah. To determine this the cause, compare the check and render counts below and see if they match what is expected. If they do not, consider increasing the timeout either at the individual method call level. Okay, and now I'm going to say
Does that work?
Let's see. It's taking its good time. So
First, it changed to verbatim strings. That was the first change it did. I do not appreciate that.
No, no. But I do think I think maybe it's one suggestion would be
Also,
adding
one,
a comma.
okay, that
there.
highly and that comma. Okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
That is,
I'm gonna say thanks, and then highly, yeah. All right,
Good.
yeah. Ship it. Now, go back here. So, well, actually, before we do anything else, let's run all our tests.
Hello, Mr. Blazer, Mr. Miku. Yes, exactly. The more of those dollar signs you use, the more of those girly brackets you can have. So,
Yep. Because
It would be
sometimes you want
interesting to
curly brackets in
know-
your strings.
and sometimes you want to have 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And I want to know now, is there an upper limit? So, if someone has the endurance to test this until next week, that would be very, very.
I'm fairly certain there isn't an upper limit besides characters in your test file.
Compiler crashes at some point, maybe. If you know because it has to tokenize that thing. Ah, amazing.
Now
Perfect.
we have a bunch of tests here that have been because we haven't figured out how to fix them, and I think need to figure out how to make this deterministic. So I think with this change in mind, I expect. Let me zoom out ever so because this has. So I would probably want to see if we can, if this now is actually.
Do we want to pick this up next week? I have to drop off soon.
I think we are at a point now where let me just run the test, commit, and we can push this.
Okay.
So, but yes, we do wanna. I think I can push and update the PR, and we can merge it in and see how all the because we have a whole bunch of PRs waiting that would probably benefit from this not.
All of the Dependabot ones.
Yeah, exactly. So they would also be like a good canary to see if we merge this to main, they would be rebased and all of that. So I think this is if we go over here now, I think it was an excellent discussion. And yeah, I think next week I guess we want to go back to what we were working on a couple of weeks ago, which was the V2 custom renderer.
That was something.
Yeah. Well, actually, we
go through TypeScript code.
Yeah. So actually, I teased not last time we streamed that I've actually converted a whole bunch of TypeScript to C# using ChatGPT, and we never got around to that because we fell into a different hole of issues. So yeah, no promises. But fingers crossed, we will get to that next Friday.
We hope for the best. If not, some directory packages, props, or other things will, come around and keep us busy.
And I do see calendar is free next Friday, so everything should be good to go on my part. Steven, I hope your elbows feel better after a good long weekend.
2 hours, yes, absolutely. I feel energized. No, thank you very much. It was lovely hanging out with you as always, and we will see us latest. Probably, hopefully, presumably next week.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for hanging out, and thanks for coding with us. See you next.
Have a nice weekend.
Friday. Yes. Bye-bye.
Exactly. Cheers.